Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I extend a warm welcome to all our guests and attendees today for the sixth episode of the Digital Dialogues. This week's episode is titled Compete and Win, Accelerating Innovation and Value by Protecting Data. We shall commence the event shortly. We have an interesting set of sessions and dialogues lined up for you today. Please use the chat functionality to ask questions, and a panel of subject matter experts will address them. We would also request you to kindly take a few minutes post the event to fill up the feedback form. Your feedback and recommendations are important for us to enhance future events for you. The first session is a business dialogue with Mr. Gaurav Kataria, Chief Digital and Information Officer, Sai Life Sciences, and is moderated by Arjun Vishwanathan, Chief Research Officer at Strategic. The segment is titled Accelerating Innovation and Value, Protecting Data and Managing Risk Together. Hello and welcome to the grand finale of Season 1 of the Digital Dialogues, brought to you by Strategic and sponsored by Dell. This is our sixth and last episode of this season. Over the last 6 weeks, you have seen us have dialogues with industry leaders and subject matter experts on a wide spectrum of themes, ranging from IT modernization to hybrid cloud, unified workspaces, AI-enabled IT, and endpoint security. In its most logical progression of sorts, episode 6 will cap it all off, where we will discuss matters related to data protection. And with me today is none other than Gaurav Kataria, Chief Digital and Information Officer at Sai Life Sciences. This segment is titled Accelerating Innovation and Value, Protecting Data and Managing Risk Together. Gaurav, very, very warm welcome, and we are delighted that you're with us today.
Thanks a lot, Arjun. It's a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Gaurav, I'm directly going to jump into it. The last, I think, 3.5 months have fairly shown us that as organizations tend to rely more and more on data, protecting data against theft, loss, and corruption also probably is critical to success. Now, data is the new capital in its most cliched statement of sorts. And whichever way that organizations kind of view data, structured or unstructured, generated by humans or machines and stored in data centers or the cloud, data is the new basis for competitive advantage. In that kind of a scenario, how do you kind of, in your office with your experience, kind of look at this whole piece about data coming together in industry for business organizations to create outcomes, positive outcomes?
Yeah, I think really, really relevant topic, Arjun, I must say, because data is key, right? But before I answer that question, let me set a little context. From my perspective, because until a few years back, I had a very myopic view of data, and working with multiple industries and working with multiple customers, that view has broadened, and I would want to share that with the audience as well, right? So let's look at 2-3 industries, right, to sort of put the point across. If you look at airline as an industry, right? We all get into planes, we fly from place A to place B, but what we don't really realize is that every plane today is one of the most modern digital equipment that's ever flown. And the amount of data that it really creates is terabytes of data.
Indeed.
Which airlines as well as OEMs really monitor, in some cases in real time, some cases otherwise, to make sure that the flight and the passengers are safe. Plus also from a maintenance perspective, the whole maintenance of the plane can be done in a manner that it adheres to the utmost levels of safety standards. Okay? So that's sort of one type of data which you can call IoT data, or you can call sensor data. Typically, just to give you a sense, on an engine when it is being tested before it rolls out, there are about 5,000 sensors which are there with it.
Yeah.
Right, which pulls all sorts of data. Right, so there's an enormous amount of data coming. So that's sort of one aspect of data. The second aspect of data, let's say, is from a pharmaceutical industry perspective, and that's where I come from. Right, I'm with this organization called Sai Life Sciences, DNO, which is a contract development and manufacturing organizations. Right, and for us, whenever we do a drug discovery process and trying to create a new molecule or a drug, or we are into manufacturing of a drug at a larger scale, data becomes really key. Because with every experiment, I should have the ability to be able to go back to the nth degree of detail to really find out where that experiment succeeded, why it succeeded, why it failed, and the entire trail and the trace, every step by step should be captured, recorded, and stored. So that data protection becomes really, really key, and then data integrity becomes really key.
True.
And I'll come back to this point later on, where I feel a lot of industries can learn from each other, and because I'm a big believer of silo busting from that perspective, right? Let's take a third example, right? Of, for example, an industry like defense.
Mm.
Right? And the reason, I'll also tell you why I'm talking about these examples, right? If you take defense as an example, today the defense forces across the globe are going to an extreme level of data capture, where they are in a position to really look at the health of a soldier fighting on the battlefield, right? And really take a remote ECG of the soldier to find out whether the soldier is hit and hence the ECG levels are dropping, or is the soldier healthy, fatigued, whatever, to make sure that the human safety and the health of the soldier is paramount and is being really monitored. Again, enormous amounts of data being captured. These data cannot be compromised. In all of these three situations that I told you cannot be compromised. So data protection is really key. But and then we have e-commerce, which a lot of people understand. There's a lot of data science which goes behind that as well. So there are different industries, but the point is, data is really important, and protection of that data, be it coming from sensors or be it coming from audits that you've done in the pharmaceutical industry or experiments that you've really entered, becomes really, really. That's one side of it. And hence, all of this is really, really critical. And as an as humans, we are generating terabytes, petabytes of data every second, right? And so all of that needs to be, I won't say all of it, but I'll say a lot of it needs to be protected, because a lot of it also is noise, right? 60% of that we generate is all noise, and it's very easy to get lost in it.
So, Gaurav, therefore, which brings me to an important question. Now, how would you therefore advise organizations to fashion the strategies about securing data in a controlled and authorized manner, such that there is fundamentally a single consistent view across the entire organization rather than, like you said, noise? What perhaps looks great to me may not be that relevant to somebody else, at least in a perception based manner. How do you kind of help organizations? How do you suggest organizations fashion that kind of a strategy?
Right. Uh, in my experience, I think what has worked best in organizations who seem to have cracked this puzzle is that they've always started with the end in mind, which basically means, what is your overall data strategy or strategy from a digital perspective?
Okay.
What do you really want to do with that data? Let's get clarity on that, right? If you look at a typical digital transformation agenda that a CDO or a CIO will take in today's context, it can have any of the three outcomes the way I look at it, right? At the at the bottommost of a pyramid, if you look like a pyramid, because that's sort of the biggest outcome that everybody is looking at, is profitability improvement through operational efficiencies, predictive maintenance, and all of that stuff. How can they run their plants better, faster? How can they make their employees more productive, etc. The second layer, which is second outcome that people could be looking at, is an outcome of driving new revenue models through that data, right? That is what the e-commerce world is very, very well known to do.
Yeah,
How
indeed.
can you sell products? How can you understand the consumer behavior through the data? Cross-sell products, etc. Amazon does a good job of it. There are multiple other platforms who do a great job of it. Interestingly, on the other side, on the airline industry, also, for example, if you look at what Airbus is doing, Airbus is creating a platform called Skywise, where they are aggregating maintenance data and flight data for the thousands of airlines that use, or hundreds of airlines that use thousands of their planes, aggregating it, and then making that available back to the airlines in a paid manner, where the airlines can actually look at benchmarking their own practices vis-a-vis best in the industry. So they've actually flipped the model of really collecting data for their own maintenance, but flipped it and given it back to the industry where people can really leverage that data, right?
Very
So they've
interesting.
actually been able to monetize that data. That's sort of one example of monetization. The third outcome that people can look at and which is often overseen or overlooked is a concept of human safety. How
Yeah.
can data really create an human impact? How can you humanize data? Right? It could be, I'm not talking about data for better decision making. That's not the point because that is, data analytics can
So
achieve that
that's
or
given.
but I'm talking about like the example that I gave from a defense perspective, where the soldier on the front line is actually being monitored on a constant basis to make sure that the soldier remains safe, right, in the battlefield. Similarly, now with situations that we are in and lockdown situation with COVID and things, there are a lot of organizations which are offering remote monitoring of patients.
Mm.
That is also sensors and data coming in, and you actually using technology and data and the power of data to make sure that somebody is healthy, and you can detect the first early indicators of health deterioration, right? And we've already seen in the US there's a company which has created these thermometers for temperature scanning, linked that all that data in the cloud, and now they have a whole map of the US available which talks about heat zones, which actually shows which are the concentrations of COVID-19.
Correct.
Right? So there's a lot of ways. But okay, so coming back to your question, if you sort of look at the end in mind, keeping the end in mind, or if you want to now roll back and then say, what are those crown jewels I want to protect? Right? What is the outcome that I'm looking at? So A, you will be able to break the noise away from the real data that you are capturing. And then what you'll also be able to do is put a data strategy in place to say that, hey, this is the data, this is the frequency at which I want to capture this data, right? Need not be 100% real time, not required, right? Sometimes mostly people feel real time is the best way to go, but it's just too expensive. So once you have a data strategy in place and you have the outcome known, then you can decide whether you want to refresh or capture that data in a real-time manner. Do you want to do it once per day, 4 times a day, etc. And then put the protection mechanisms around it to make sure that you protect. Some data is trade secret internally for the organization.
Indeed.
Elements, that we do, in the pharmaceutical industry, could be trade secrets that you want to, control. Network segregation, or making sure that there are adequate DLP rules, data leak prevention tools, which are used, and those policies are put in place to protect data. So there are multiple of those things can be done, but I think the first thing, like you said, which is imperative to do, is to get a data strategy, identify the data and the outcome, and then all of the technology can follow to protect that data.
Very interesting that you mentioned this, Gaurav, because what I also wanted to therefore understand from you, and I'm sure so does the audience, the wonderful audience that's listening in to us, is for your guidance really, and with your very rich, vast experience in being able to fathom the correct or the appropriate standards of governance and security that are really required, given, like you just said, the vast, copious volumes of data across on-prem, local machines, and cloud architectures. How do you kind of fashion? How do you approach something like this?
So it's actually been very interesting, right? Till about 5 years back, there was this whole push to move data back to the cloud, right?
Mm,
And everybody started moving data to the cloud, basically from a perspective that there is, redundancy which is built out. That was one. The cost of me as an individual or an organization maintaining my own data center is fairly high. So people realized that there was that economic benefit that you could strike at a certain level of volume and load, etc. Then making going to the cloud made sense. Interestingly, over and I don't think this is a trend yet as yet, but what I'm starting to see is places where data is absolutely critical and as a business differentiator,
correct.
people are interestingly pulling that data back on-prem,
On-prem.
right? Or they're putting it into their own private clouds that they've created rather than going into public clouds. So they're moving
Correct.
away from public cloud in some cases and moving it into a private cloud. And so that is sort of a reverse trend that I am starting to see, which is coming up in the industry, right? Even in cases, obviously, in cases of defense projects or in cases of banking and finance, right? There are regulations which control all of this data sovereignty, kind of norms which are already there in place, where the data center has to be in country,
Mm,
no export of data outside the boundaries allowed. If you look at GDPR norms, from Europe perspective, there are strict controls of exporting that, data as well. India is coming out with a privacy norm
Yeah.
as well, Privacy Data Protection Act. So that will put its own controls, etc. Right? But so that is one angle of it, right? Of where the data is. But with all of this data protection, is really important. But one is protection. I think sometimes the other thing that we all need to also look at is data integrity. I'm protecting the data, but the data that I'm protecting, is it actually in the state in which it was created originally? Right? Is the data getting corrupt? You're protecting data, but what about the corruption of the data that might happen? So two things become important. One is protecting the data and putting controls of data at rest, also at data in motion. And then data integrity becomes important, right? Like I said. Now, if you look at the pharma industry, there is the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration Authority. They've come out with something called, they call the CFR 21 Part 11, which
Okay.
basically talks about data protection and data integrity, right? That is, I think, a brilliant standard. Not that the ISO 27001 doesn't talk about it, but the detail at which the FDA goes in some of those critical areas, and this is where I was talking about silo busting. Let's learn from the pharmaceutical industry and apply it to an airline industry. This, similar sort of controls. Let's learn from the airline industry because safety is really critical. Apply it into some other industry.
Indeed, Gaurav. Indeed.
Yeah. So what I was also saying, Arjun, is that while data integrity is important, data capture and the end goal is important. Coming back to the question that you were asking on one version of truth, right? So from that perspective, what is really really important is that we need to make sure that as part of our data strategy and the data governance strategy that the organization puts in place, that one version of truth is really important. So the sooner we can digitize and the sooner we can move to paperless, right, and make sure that all the data is coming into one database and one source out of which all my data analytics is running, it becomes so much more easier. Because otherwise, what happens is with Excel sheets, while I love Excel, but with Excel
Don't we
sheets
all?
across the organization, right, everybody has his own version of truth.
So true.
They
So
all
true.
run their own you know you know formulae, and then they look at the data in their own manner. Then the data source is different, right? So sometime back in my previous organization when I was at Scient, I think one of the projects that we did way back in 2016 was to make sure that the financial dashboards, for example, become one source of truth. So everything comes from one central data hub or a data lake, and the entire organization, right from the project manager to the board, everybody is looking at the same data, their own slices and dices of the data, but one golden source of truth. So that becomes really really critical for an organization to do, to ensure that there is consistency that is driven, and everybody is moving to the same end goal.
Gaurav, which brings me to a very interesting conversation that's dominating discussions today is this entire lockdown. Very unfortunate, a human tragedy at its foremost, but nevertheless an industry disruption of sorts in the manner in which we work. So suddenly we've had a situation where the very concepts of the workspace, the workplace, the work culture, and the workforce, which is employees, contractors, has all very dynamically and very radically shifted. Now, with remote working becoming the norm, and going forward, perhaps not ceding from an operating model as quickly as one would like it to, you're
Right.
also realizing that people are working today agnostic of space and time, and a lot of work that is being done. So my point is going to be in the form of two questions to you. The first is really, with this remote working kind of a concept and with lots of very important data capital being stored in local machines, how difficult does that become in being able to protect data, and therefore what would be your points of view on that? So that's
Right.
question one. And my second question, of course, is, we understand the data has got to be protected, but how do you protect it in such a manner so as to not stifle uh, freedom, convenience, innovation, and collaboration.
Right. Yeah. So I think both important questions, and specifically, like you said, in these times, right? What is, see, if I sort of look at the first question that you asked,
Yeah.
right? With remote, how do you control data? How do you protect data? And the second one that you spoke about is predominantly how do you continue to drive innovation, right? With all the data protection in place. If you actually look at it, this is the time when I'm seeing, with the constraint on resources, right? People are at their best from an innovation perspective, right? Business models are changing,
Mm.
right? A lot of large organizations are coming forward and saying that, we employed 300,000 employees, but going forward in the next 5 years, maybe lesser than that, we'll have a lot of these employees continue to work from home. So, it suddenly from a real estate and heavy model, it'll turn into a real estate light model,
Correct.
right? So that itself is a way of, looking at business innovation, right? Which the constraints are forcing people to sort of think in a different manner, right? If you look at organizations, and I'll give you an example, right? Over the last 4 days for us, we've been trying to look at an app, or a device which will help us do contact tracing of our employees,
Wow.
right? And also to try and make sure that we can track whether they are going into a containment zone as defined by the government or not, so that proactively as an HR team, they can reach out to this employee and say, hey, you've been in the containment zone. We don't know whether you knew it or not, but stay safe, stay at home, quarantine yourself, make sure that, you don't expose yourself to family, don't,
Indeed.
so keep them safe as well, right? So it's with that intention. And when we picked this project up 3-4 days back, and our HR head came back and our CEO came back and said, we want to do something like this. The safety head, all of us got into it. And I sent out one LinkedIn, post to say I'm looking at something like this. Within 3-4 days, they've been nearly 2,000, views, and we've actually had conversations with at least 10 different
Wow.
organizations, including the big four consulting organizations as well. All of them have some solutions in some sort of way, right? So people have been on their feet trying to figure out how to look at GPS data,
True.
how to look at containment zone data as declared by the governments, right? How to look at Arogya Setu data, which is the self-declaration data, and then created a great, and then look at IoT data, because if you want to do contact tracing within the organization, there are some people who are giving wristbands that you can wear, and it will give you an alert from a proximity perspective. All of these solutions are ready. So what people have done is they've picked up existing solutions, connected the dots, and built something out, which is very, very relevant for today's day and age. And this has all happened in a lockdown situation, where people are not really getting into a boardroom to do whiteboarding sessions and do design thinking workshops and, really doing this thing. But they already have pricing models ready. They have they have solutions ready and all of that stuff, to offer, to actually help with this problem. And it was very, very interesting to see the agility with which we've all stood up on our feet and started innovating about this one problem statement. Now, if you sort of go away from this problem statement and broaden your horizon, right? So according to me, I don't think that this situation is going to stifle innovation. I think it's only going to push the barriers of innovation, and people are going to start innovating more and more. And if I sort of go back to my examples of pharmaceutical industry, or if I go back to my examples of the airline industry, e-commerce, etc., with all the data protection, which is extremely important in those industries, right? Keeping personal data, credit card data, safe and secure, and then keeping airline data, safe and secure. There has never been an instance where they have not innovated. So they have continued to innovate. So the data protection is for a certain reason. And I think if people understand, and that is why having that end goal, like that I was talking to you about earlier, is important, because once you have the end goal in mind, the policies that you as an organization will define to protect data will make sure that those policies are not, over enforced, right? And there is a right balance between freedom and policy enforcement, and also with technologies available today without really stifling the employee to really think and innovate and collaborate with the outer ecosystem, because the gig economy is something else which is again here to stay and is picking up,
True.
right? So if we are looking at all of that, then done correctly and really thought through, right? Keeping the human being at the center of all of that and using that
Indeed.
design thinking principle, I think the innovation will not get stifled at all, right? So there has to be a method to the madness and how this is done. It cannot be our age-old, practice to say, while I am also a believer of zero trust, so to say, from an organization perspective, that's where everything starts. But then zero trust cannot be used to stop trusting an employee or a human being. Zero trust has to be limited to the controls that you put in place and the technology enforcement and the automation that you bring in, so that the innovation doesn't get stifled, but the data is still protected.
Indeed, indeed, and Gaurav, this is very interesting because we've also got a question from the audience that's listening and tuning into us right now. Is what amount of data protection is ever enough? Is there a concept even as data protection is enough? Uh, how do you kind of respond to that?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting question because it's never enough. But at the end of the day, I think keeping a constant vigil is more important, right? Training your employees and the vendor work ecosystem and the contractors that you work with is extremely important, because more often than not, that is the piece which is missed out, right? We do a lot of employee outreach to tell people and educate people about malware and cybersecurity and best practices for data protection, etc., to our employees. But more often than not, we forget the contractors that we work with. More often than not, we forget the vendors that we work with,
Yes, indeed.
right? And that is the place where the data leak most often than not happens, right? Because inadvertently something is sent out and then something goes away from that vendor, because a lot of these partners that we work with are not large organizations who can afford so much of data protection controls in place. So that aspect, the larger ecosystem has to be thought about, right? And once those are put in place and there is a constant education that is happening, right? According to me, that's fine. The other thing is also, there is, if let's say, we are in the business of pharmaceuticals and making medicine, somebody who's on the other side is a hacker, he's in the business of hacking.
Sure.
There is no way that I can beat that individual, you know because that's his job and that's his expertise, and this is my job and my expertise, right? So, will be all anytime be 100% secure? Very, very difficult to say. I don't
Perhaps
think
not.
it will happen, right? But at the end of the day, it has to be practical, and that is one of the reasons why people are moving a lot of their critical data back on premise, and making sure that it's more in their control, and then they can put the controls around it to make sure that there is no risk of that data, from a cloud perspective. I'm not saying cloud is not secure, but at the end of the day, the amount of control that you can put in as an organization, and from a cost perspective as well, that's the other reason why people are moving back. But then the point is, all of that, there's that whole sense to say, if it's in my, if it's in front of me, it's more protected. It's that psyche,
Yeah, yeah.
that way, right, at the end of the day. But with everybody going into distributed environments, everybody working and playing, and working from their homes, right? This is, and we starting to leverage the gig economy and using freelancers, and
Indeed.
uh, it is going to become critical. Putting technology controls is going to be important, right? Keeping in mind that the business process and the innovation is not stifled.
Gaurav, let me also come to you therefore. to leverage the experience that you so brilliantly bring is I think it is a I think the only certainty is that uncertainty is going to be the norm, by and large. So in fairly uncertain realities, really, uh, if you were to be speaking, and I speak on behalf of the audience here, if you were to speak on behalf of this audience to the overall the OEM or the vendor, the technology vendor world, as it were, uh, what kind of data protection solutions would you recommend being crafted, designed, and innovated upon uh, to be able to take forward quite a lot of the points that you mentioned, whether it is real-time protection of our defense forces that are at the borders and engaged in various things, or it is about airline security and therefore passenger and human security at that point. The whole concept of preemptive health and overall citizen well-being. If you were to kind of put all of this together, essentially talking about a future that is fairly uncertain, but certainly has to be reimagined, what would be your guidance to the technology vendor world?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that we are sort of in we are in the middle of a renewed society.
Indeed.
And this renewed society comes in from a perspective that we as individuals have started to trust each other much more. Because if you see, the productivity of an average organization hasn't really dipped,
No, it hasn't.
right? And if it hasn't dipped and the person is not in front of you, but that person is still performing an output, that means the trust levels are higher,
Indeed.
right? So if the trust levels are higher, there are two ways to look at it. One is, obviously it is good that in the renewed society the trust levels are high and we're working. But then there are always other people who are looking at misusing this
Of
trust.
course. Of course.
And familiarity breeds contempt. So you can always go down that path. But so from an OEM ecosystem perspective, I think there is enough technology which is already there, and we constantly keep on trying to innovate on technology. So that is something that they will continue to do. But my only recommendation, from the OEM ecosystem is, when you have a conversation with, let's say, the CDO or CIO, or maybe the chief data officer in some organizations, understand the problem statement, take a consultative approach. Some of them do, some don't. It's not about us, selling a solution it's not about selling a product any longer. It is about selling a solution, right? So you have to take a step back, look at what the business process is, look at what the end goal is, and then suggest a solution that fits in. A lot of the times, on the flip side, the CIOs, the CDOs, etc., also they have to be open to changing their own business processes to use a certain technology to its fullest. And that change management and that business process change is often a big challenge in large organizations
Yes.
and
True
small
that.
organizations alike, because it is dealing with the human culture
Culture by
and
itself,
the
the
way a
mindset by
human,
itself.
it's a mindset issue, right? And that's what design thinking also talks about, right? It is the most difficult to get somebody else to do things differently, right? And that is a challenge which will remain. So till the time we are cognizant of the fact that there are human beings involved at the end of the day, and whatever we are designing has to be kept with the human in the center, right? I think we'll win the battle.
Outstanding, outstanding. Gaurav, when you kind of boil all of this down, so I'm going to fashion this question in a very considered manner. Vast amounts of experience in traditional business models.
Right.
And then, of course, the onset of the late 2018, 2019, when we really saw the explosion of emergent technologies and the whole concept of data becoming so pivotal in driving positive and sustained business outcomes. And of course, the third aspect being this last three and a half, three odd months now that have truly tested our resilience and everything that we've held dear and sacred and tested it to the utmost limit. When you kind of bring it all together, what, Gaurav Kataria, would, in your view, be your outlook for the whole concept of the future of trust looking ahead, if you were to be able to?
See, there are the so future of trust. As we move forward, I'm a firm believer. I'm actually a very positive person from that perspective, right? So I'm a firm believer that the trust factor will only go up, and we've actually seen this, like I just mentioned,
Yes.
a minute back on the COVID situation. So I think the trust factor will go up. The trust factor will also go up predominantly because technology is becoming smarter.
Yeah.
We are in a position to apply artificial intelligence and look at people patterns to really figure out. And I'm not saying that we should look at people patterns because I don't trust somebody, but it has to be with an intention to enable that individual to perform his or her role better, so that there is no question of mistrust.
Indeed. Very well said.
So
Yeah.
how can you create an environment where I know as an organization that the piece of work that I've given to a member of my team or to a colleague will get executed without me even thinking about trust or mistrust or that question even arising? Because there are technology in place, there are controls in place, right, which will do their job because that's what they're supposed to
Meant
do
to
and
do.
what their intention is, right? So as technology evolves, right, and as we sort of move forward, right, I think fundamentally we're starting to trust human beings more, in this whole renewed society. Second, technology is evolving so we can apply it more smartly, right, without hindering innovation, like you were mentioning earlier, right? And but at the end of the day, from wearing a CISO's hat, I will definitely say, go with an approach of zero trust, but zero trust not on an individual, but zero trust on your systems and your networks,
And
right? And
processes.
your in processes and your environment. So be critical from that perspective, right? The pharmaceutical industry, interestingly, has another concept which is very less known outside, called this computer system validation,
Okay.
CSV, right? Where every computer system which is deployed in an environment which is directly or indirectly connected to the creation of a drug, needs to be validated that the system will perform consistently in the manner it is intended to be, used.
Interesting.
Whether it's an IoT device or whether it's a computer laptop that an individual is using, be it a server, be it a network router, be it, whatever piece of equipment, technology equipment that you're talking about. And the intention of that is that I can, once that computer system validation is done, and then periodic revalidations are done, I can now trust that piece of equipment to make sure, to be rest assured that it will perform the job it is
It
supposed
is
to do.
meant to do.
It is meant to
Indeed.
do, right? So I'm already going in with the mindset that I don't trust anything. So I will do a computer system validation on everything, right? But once I've done it and I've ensured that the policies are set and the configuration is set in a certain manner, then there is 100% trust on that machine.
Very, 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 very powerfully put. Very, very
Right?
powerfully
So
put.
if you do a zero trust on your network and your hardware, on your configuration and your process, but always trust the human being. Otherwise, there is no way
It's a
that you can
never-ending game.
progress as an organization, right? You can never progress as an organization.
Gaurav, as we do taper down, and I do have a view on the clock, and I know you have a hard stop. Two quick questions. Gaurav Kataria, your top two predictions reference technology for the months and the years to come.
Okay, that's a tough one. There's so much happening in the space. Um, I think we've only scratched the scratch when it comes to machine learning, right? That will become all persuasive. Not that it isn't today, but even today, if I look at the percentage of AI, ML, kind of projects succeeding, I think it's only 20% of the project is succeeding, right? I was looking at a report which spoke about that Europe spent last year, that's 2019, nearly $1 trillion, or actually as an economy, we spend nearly $1 trillion on digital transformation, out of which only 8% was successful projects, right? So there was a lot of money which went down the drain. But that's sort of the nature, of this whole thing, because if I look at, data, the main insight that you can derive out of data is with the use of technology going forward, which is like ML and AI and stuff like that. Right? That I see as one thing which will really, really catch up, and I don't think it's reached the potential it can. So that's one big thing. The second thing is I think quantum, right? Use of quantum computing, will catch up because the amount of data is only increasing. We don't have enough time to process this data to come out with meaningful insights. Some of these insights need to be given real time, right? And so quantum fairly new. A lot of research and research dollars are going into it. There are a few early wins here and there, but I think that's the second piece linked from a data perspective. That will definitely be.
Outstanding, Gaurav. And I just have time for one last question. And this one's an interesting one. Gaurav, last 90 odd days, what has been the single biggest learning, personally or professionally, either ways, that's going to stay with you for a long, long time to come? Because all of us had kind of entered the 23rd of March in a certain fashion, but we seem to be exiting June in well, very, very different forms. And flows. What's been your, Gaurav Kataria, single biggest learning that's going to stick with you?
Not that yeah. So reflecting back, I think one of the things, being at home, spending time with family, I think I've sort of really realized that whatever we do, all the hard work that we all put in is for the family back home, right? And our extended family and parents and whatever. So I think as long as the moral compass and our vertical alignment is right, I think these little ups and downs with one COVID or with a financial crisis coming up and down, I think can be overcome. And we are a very, very resilient and strong race. We've survived for so many years, and I think we will continue to survive. So but I think that whole family and the moral compass has to be strong.
That was brilliantly put, Gaurav. It has been nothing short of a delight and a privilege to have spoken with you, and I'm sure the audience feels the same way. Thank you so much for joining us. It was truly lovely.
Likewise, Arjun, thank you for having me here, and it was brilliant conversing with you, and a very, very pertinent and relevant topic.
Thank you. And for the audience, that's for segment one. Stay tuned. We'll be back very shortly with the live poll and segment two, followed by a question answer session, which will be live. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kataria, for your candid views and for sharing your experiences around architecting viable business outcomes and ensuring data protection. The next segment is a business dialogue with Mr. Rajinder Bedi, Technical Solutions Specialist for Intel India and APJ, and Mr. Nitin Bhatia, Software Manager, Data Protection Solutions, Dell Technologies India, and is moderated by Arjun Vishwanathan. The segment is titled Beyond Valuable, How Data Protection Can Change Enterprise Fortunes. Hello and welcome back to segment two of the Digital Dialogues. This segment is very aptly titled Beyond Valuable, How Data Protection Can Change Enterprise Fortunes. And in dialogue with me today are two very, very eminent industry subject matter experts and business leaders. Please join me in welcoming Nitin Bhatia, Software Manager, Data Protection, Dell Technologies India. Nitin, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Arjun.
And Rajinder Bedi, Technical Solution Specialist, Enterprise Clients, Intel APJ. Rajinder, nice to have you back with us again. Our dialogue was very well received in episode 5. And in gentlemen, this is season 1's grand finale, episode 6. We will then, of course, take a break and shortly be back with season 2. But you just, in fact, gentlemen, if I were to directly jump into it, you just heard me in conversation with Gaurav Kataria, Chief Digital and Information Officer at Sai Life Sciences, where I think his articulation of data protection solutions by themselves, or the very concept of data protection and the future of trust, were very interesting from the point of view that his logic was the data protection at its most basic and primal jobs, or what it is meant to do, must be that it must inflict positive value in business outcomes, which is revenue generation, profit margins, and of course, the whole concept of human safety. How, Nitin, if I could come to you, how at Dell Technologies do you kind of look at the whole concept of data protection in driving business outcomes that are measurable and sustained?
So Arjun, if you look at the strategy that Dell is adopted with data protections, we look at reusing data. Today, the most important part to our customers is how can they extract value out of the information that has been protected terabytes and terabytes. And I would take you back sometime in history where Dell decided to move into a model where applications are protected in their native formats. Today, when they're protected in their native format, the encapsulation of data is not there, which allows them to reuse cloud from edge to go to cloud, reusing this data and information. And you rightly put in, it's driven by saying, as Gaurav put in, right? How can I manage this information and generate revenue out of it? I'll give you a classic example for one of our customers. We actually used the backed up data information to generate reports for its customer satisfaction environment. Oh. So this itself proves how Dell is helping their customers today with the whole story of having computes, storages, and data protection, and building up the layers of virtualization and helping them get value the most out of their information. So
interesting point. I'm going to take that to Rajinder. Rajinder, you are at the center of a lot of innovation at Intel at an ABG level. You've heard Nitin, we obviously heard Gaurav. How do you what's your orientation or strategic view on this? Data protection, important, but must have value.
Yes, absolutely. I think without value, data protection may not be even relevant for the organizations, right? So you have to extract the value out of a data, and you need to process the data so that it contributes to your bottom line as well. Right? So that's the value of a data which every organizations look for. At Intel, we are actually at the center of these innovations, and we are driving lots of solutions along with our customers and partners so that they can move as closer to data as possible, right? And if you're closer to that data, then you can take a decision which is like a split-second decisions and drive those decisions to those kind of a devices. Take an example of an autonomous car driving, right? You can't have that luxury of storing a data and maybe taking a day or a 2 day to process it and then give a command to a car. So it has to happen in a split second so that you can make a way for the. So that's what we are, as a technology leader in this field, we are trying to drive those things and trying to make it as easier and as faster for the customers so that they can use it and they can contribute to their bottom line rather than just keeping it stored somewhere. Stored data is not good, right? You need to go and make some meaning out of that.
Rajendra, if I may stick with you, one of the other points that came up in my conversation and dialogue with Gaurav really was the whole concept of how, data protection by itself is important. And we understand that the ability of data, like you rightly said, and like Nitin said, to be able to leverage data, to be able to monetize it, and also to democratize it to a certain degree. How at Intel, and of course I am going to come to Nitin for Dell also, how do you kind of ensure that data protection by itself does not stifle innovation and collaboration? Shouldn't be
Uh,
always
to be
like
really
big brothers watching.
correct. I mean, to be really frank, you can't look at innovations and data processing in a two different way, right? It has to go in the same line. Uh, Lots of time your innovation actually will be depending upon what your data is saying, and it could be your marketing data, and it could be a product related data also. Means Intel generates maybe thousands of IPs every year,
Mm.
right? And those are the critical data for us to come and protect. Means if the IPs are exposed, not only for Intel, but for any other company, right? Then you can't go and do the innovations in the market. So in my view, both of them have to go in parallel to each other. And that's what we try to do within Intel as well. So we have those multi-layered approach for all our employees where the data access is available on a need to know basis to each and every people, right? For example, if I'm working in a sales department, then I will not be have an access to a design level data and so on. You build those kind of hierarchies within the organizations. So yeah,
But do they
that's where
allow
we
for seamless collaboration?
yes. So again, for example, let's say we are designing something new. I took an example of an autonomous car, right? And it's obviously is in collaboration which happens within a various different countries, not only within different cities in a country. So it's
Of course.
across the different
Borderless worlds.
countries, right? Correct. And then you have to make sure that all those all different offices in the countries are actually on the same platform. And we in the world of a technology, there is a concept of a data lake,
Yeah.
right? And if you build a data lake which is fast enough, then you can actually go and connect the various different offices to that data lake,
Indeed.
so that
Indeed.
everybody is kind of on the same page and actually are kind of developing on top of each other, not
On top of
really
incremental value, which is what I'm going to
incremental
take to
values.
Nitin. Nitin, it's very interesting what Rajendra just mentioned is that you're essentially building hierarchy, but you're also enabling an ecosystem or a theater where incremental value can be built. Now, I'm going to come to you from the perspective of Dell Technologies. How do you help with your data protection solutions in not only protecting the data, but in also enabling organizations to carry forward innovation and therefore value generation?
So, Georgian, you hit the nail on the head right now. So today, a lot of our customers, what we're doing to them is bridging the gap between the legacy and the next proven environment,
Indeed,
right?
indeed.
So today, a lot of customers need to catch up with legacy. You've just seen with COVID hitting us big, there are new ways, there are new modern times that people had to look at. And there are instances where people had to move to cloud because supply chain was at a stop, production was at stop. So everything, your business couldn't stop. And same way, how do you move your data protection from your physical architecture to the cloud architecture is
Indeed.
also important. Now, this was coming to how do you monetize your information. Uh, I'll just take a pause here and also pick on one of the areas of cybersecurity. Today, when you're moving all these information, Arjun, it is also important how are you looking at security here. Today, Dell provides their customer a single visibility into legacy, future of proven and modern approach with having a single layer of cybersecurity environment. Today, we are working with our customers on an air gap model where wherever their data arrives, today we have been able to create a layered security for them, making sure that their data is protected at any given point of time, even uh, when it is a zero-day attack. Which gets me to a point where Gaurav was talking about his way of governing bodies coming to it, and you rightly said the big brother watching. Today, uh, a lot of our customers come back and say that yeah, we've been working with Dell Technologies for a very long time. And I have customers who have been using our products for a decade plus, and data domain being the, I would say, the center of their data and information. Today, we have been innovating with Intel with higher processors and giving this data and information in a reusability format. So and I may touch upon, today we're talking about multi-dimensional appliances, where reusing this information is the key towards the building a data protection strategy. And that's what is changing the world of data protection.
In fact, both Rajinder and Nitin, I'm just going to stick with you for another minute. Both Rajinder and you fundamentally have spoken about the whole concept of real-time data. Now, the first question is, and something that Gaurav also brought out in my conversation was real-time data processing by itself is an expensive affair. And well, while the cost aspect is at one end, the second aspect is unless, of course, it's really required, is it just a nice to have? I'm saying if I were to kind of bring it to a uniform playing ground level, do Dell Technologies and Intel, when they come together, provide data protection in its truest sense at a real-time level? And I'm sure the audience is extremely curious and intrigued too.
So
Or is it a fallacy? We'd be very happy to be told it's not the reality, it is near real time. But I'm very intrigued to hear you. And then, of course, Rajinder.
So, Rajendra, you want to take this first, and then okay, I will address
Rajinder,
it.
if I could come to you, please.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think it all depends upon the kind of industries we are talking about. For some industries, I think the real data is a must to have. For example, your financial industries, right? The banks, the stock
Indeed.
exchanges, right? They can't wait for something to happen and then maybe realize a few days later. So they do need a real-time data so that they can make sense whether some fraud activity is going on or not. They have to stop it before something happens. So real-time data is definitely important from them. From a technology perspective, yes, the instruments exist today as well, which helps you to monitor a real-time data. You just need to have that constant feed coming up to you. And there are technologies which are available, which helps you, whether it's an organized data or an unorganized data, to club them and start making some sense out of it so that you take a decisions before something happens rather than after the fact. So I think it's important for as per the different industries you go and address them.
Listen, you want to take a stab at that now?
Yeah, so this was the technical approach of it, and now we'll come to the business approach of using this. So as I was putting my thoughts on the cybersecurity environment, right? Today, a lot of customers are using real-time information to protect from cybersecurity, and
Indeed.
I'll just deviate this to a product kind of a discussion. Today, one of our customers is into development of softwares, and today these guys use snapshots and technologies like continuous data protection to roll back to an instance where probably that could be a manual error. And you and Gaurav spoke about trust. Today, a lot of cyber incidents are because of an insider intrusion, and CDP helps in to a very large point where you could go back or roll back a DVR kind of a functionality and go to that point in time and recover your information. But I will completely agree with Rajendra sir that today, if you look at, is it everybody's, and this is what we've been telling our customers. Today, each qualification of workload is important. Not all workloads have to be catered in the same way of data protection. If you look at for banking environments, and I spent pretty good time with Dell managing the banking sector, we've actually qualified our informations into tier 1 and tier 2 approaches. And each of these are being catered to a different way. So we believe in a concept of saying that one size doesn't fit all.
It does certainly
Each
does.
workloads and each workload needs to be catered in a way where you could use technology like CDP for your tier 1 workloads, having the availability, building up the continuum. And you can also look at environments where we are talking about archive of your information. Because and tomorrow there is still the big brother watching you, where he would need that information for 7 years. We are right at the center of the data protection law being coming in India.
Interesting.
It's been looked upon by the parliament. And believe me, today personal information is going to be as important. And that's going to lead different ways of doing what data protection for India is going to be looked at.
Lovely, lovely. But I do have a view on the clock, gentlemen. Something that I think is a very important and pertinent question at the moment is, and Rajinder, if I may come to you, when you look at the concepts of the future of trust and how an uncertain reality is what kind of lies ahead for us as individuals, for us as people, and for industry by itself. Are you, when you kind of collaborate with Intel at such a close level, are you reimagining the concepts of the future of trust? And what are the symbiotic elements that are coming together to ensure that data protection in the future is far, far more advanced and mature than we've ever traditionally kind of looked at it.
Correct. And I think it's pretty important. Look, if you see trust in its very basic form, right? It's basically which enables to make your decision between two or more entities with a level of a confidence. And it's true between humans and between some machines as well, right? But if you look at the future of a trust, it basically brings into an elements like risk assessment, the compliance, the privacy, and even the business ethics as well. So your
Yeah, indeed.
definition, so your definitions of a trust is pretty broad as we move into the future, and even today also, right? You are seeing a GDPR getting implemented across the Europe and US, and it's going to come to this part of the world as well. So your privacy and your data is going to be much more important. So I think we are reaching to a state where you'll say that the organizations should have a conversation saying that what should they should move away from saying that what should a company do to a stage where they should say that, okay, what we must do to protect our data, right? So
So
that's not a
true.
question of a should anymore,
So true.
as I see the future of a trust.
Lovely, lovely, very powerful, and your points are there. Same thing. How do you guys come together? How do you folks come together to fashion solutions that are truly uncertain, unpredictable, are always going to be unforeseen, and well, the latest word that I'm given to understand is unprecedented.
So Arjun, seriously, spending so much time in the data protection world, there was one thing that each one of our customers looked at, yeah, and that was when there are new things and new functionalities that you need to add into your data protection, and there is a lot of legacy there. I've worked with customers where they've said, "Oh, you know something, I can't only move on because I have so much amount of legacy information lying with me." Today at Dell, what we're trying to do is we started agile development.
Okay.
Today, the new software that we're coming up with is helping customers do their updates really seamlessly. So it's about innovation added to an environment where customer is able to monetize the information, reuse that information from faster processors from Intel, flash drives in our purpose-built architectures, and also helping customers harness cloud. And here you could look at when we did a report with ESG, we were talking about 70% lower cost on cloud, which is governing an information of the spend that the customer is going to do in his own business innovation and not spending uh, a lot on what is required to store that information.
And I'm presuming you mean it both from the public as well as the private cloud concept.
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely.
It's a multi-cloud approach today. That's again the new thing.
Well, gentlemen, that pretty much is what we have time for, but it still would like to ask one question. And Nitin, if I may come to you, 90 days of well, I'm going to use the cliched word again, unprecedented disruption. What's been that one single biggest learning, either personally or professionally, that's going to stay with you for a long, long time to come?
Life doesn't stop.
Life doesn't stop.
We find new ways. I'm connecting still with my customers. I'm connecting with you on a virtual platform today.
Absolutely.
So the new world is great. That's something.
Outstanding. Thanks, Nitin. Rajinder, your single biggest learnings are?
Family first, man.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Yes. Oh, absolutely. That goes without saying. But gentlemen, Rajinder, Nitin, it has been nothing short of a privilege and a delight speaking with you. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm sure the audience loved every minute of our dialogue. Thank you, Nitin. Pleasure you could join us today.
Thank you, Arjun. Thank you, Rajinder.
Thank you, Rajinder.
Thank you, Arjun.
Folks, that's pretty much from us for season 1, episode 6 of the Digital Dialogues. Stay tuned. We'll be back with the live poll, and I will be available to answer any questions that you may have in live format. This is Arjun Vishwanathan, Chief Research Officer at Strategic, signing off. Thank you. Stay safe. Thank you, Nitin, and thank you, Rajinder. It has been a pleasure having heard your views and experiences. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of episode 6. Stay tuned with us because shortly after the live poll, Gaurav Kataria, Chief Digital and Information Officer for Sai Life Sciences, and I, Arjun Vishwanathan, will be live on video and audio to take your questions. We look forward to it. Stick on, stay tuned.
Hey Arjun, I can't hear you.
Yep, sorry about that. I was on mute. Thanks, Gaurav, for joining and making time. Very, very pleased that you could join us for the live question answer session. For the audience, we are now live and very happy to take any questions that you may have. In the meantime, Gaurav, I do have a couple of questions that people have already kind of asked of us. The first really is by Ashwini Sharma, who says, against on-premises data storage, experts tend to claim that cloud providers can give more protection because of fairly advanced and emerging technologies. What's your view on this, Gaurav? How would you kind of balance one against the other?
So yeah, absolutely. I think there are certain cases in which the cloud providers can do a better job. It's also a factor of the dollars which are being spent,
Indeed.
and the research dollars and the technology dollars which sort of go behind protection of the data. So from that perspective, absolutely. But if you really don't need your data to be on the cloud, right, and you think the data is highly secure, then it is a call that you'll have to take to pull data back on, into your environment and then protect it, on your own. So as long as you're confident of that, you have, let's say, a security operations center, you have the necessary tools, you have the necessary capabilities and the skilled staff, to manage it internally, then that's a call that, and you have a choice, let me put it that way. But, if you are a light organization and you want, to outsource that bit, then it's best to go to a cloud provider, because, they can do a damn good job as well. So it depends on what the
actually what the business model is, because this was quite similar to the question that Narinder Singh had also asked, whereby his question was, is this not more powerful and the scalable approach really to have data on the cloud than an on-prem kind of a system? So I'm presuming both of them kind of interlock each other as questions. So Narinder and Ashwini, I hope Gaurav was able to address the question. Prasad Tripurari, and I hope I got your name correct, asked us a very interesting question, saying, can we implement 100% data security for any organization? Is it a reality?
No, it's definitely not a reality. Like I mentioned earlier, right? The hackers are in the business of hacking. We are in the business of running our own businesses, right? So it will be very difficult for us to beat them. Can you do 100% data security? Absolutely. Don't go on the internet. Don't expose anything to the internet. Stay, within your four walls. You'll be completely protected, right? So as long as you don't have exposure to the internet and you are an intranet, and data being exchanged within your own, four walls and network, you can be protected, theoretically speaking. Then there is that insider threat, which is always there. But like I said, you have to start with the trust on the employees. So,
very true. In fact, Bhishma KS, who's joined us from the web, of course, also asked a similar question, saying, how safe is cloud when it comes to unified storage? But I do guess that you already answered that. Folks, if we have no more questions, we will commence to close the session. I have a last request. Please do fill up the feedback forms Your feedback is very, very important to us. All right, Jitendra Raval asks us a similar question. What are the benefits of on-cloud solution? Data can be little far than it is actually. I'm not very sure, Jitendra. I kind of understood the question.
So Arjun, if I may add, I think
Yeah, sure,
it's sort of
please, Gaurav.
to what I was saying earlier, reiterating, one more time that you have to start with the end in mind. You have to look at your business objectives and business imperatives. You have to look at your overall digital strategy and your data strategy that you have, and then work backwards to what solution fits the bill. Right? It could be cloud, it could be on-prem. Security has to be put in place. Data protection is really, really critical. And like I said, I just want to repeat myself. It's not only the data protection, but the data integrity is equally important. And if we follow some of these basic principles, I'm sure we'll be able to come back with an optimal solution, which is fit for business purpose. And sometimes as technologists, we end up looking at a solution more from a technology perspective.
Then
very, very enamored with AI-based solutions available in the market and things like that. But what we have to always constantly question ourselves, check is it solving a business purpose? And I think that's most important.
Very interesting. Lokesh Lakshmaya has also asked a question: how do we protect image data on the cloud? Lokesh, to address that question, well, this will form the scope of work that you, as an organization, will agree, depending on what your business model and your the overall outcomes that you're trying to drive is. So whether it's image-based data or it's binary data, one form or the other, or it's structured or unstructured. Gaurav also just mentioned that the end is what is really important. So long as you have the end visualized clearly, the steps will kind of pan themselves out. But thank you, Gaurav. That pretty much is what we have time for. It is 4:12 as we speak. Thank you so much, sir. We are delighted that you could join us. Thank you once again, folks, for joining us for the grand finale of season 1 and episode 6. I was in conversation with Gaurav Kataria, Chief Digital and Information Officer at Sai Life Sciences. Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, folks. Stay safe. All the best.
Thanks, Arjun, for having me here.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.